A problem fully understood is a problem half solved. We're putting these videos out because this is our lived experience. This is what we're seeing in our market. We are tired of seeing our buyers get beat out by these corporations. Buyers are always disadvantaged in a seller's market. But the entire game changes when you have corporate investors and institutional money in the mix. That's not markets behaving like markets. That's institutional money coming after generational wealth. The pressure from these cash offers isn't just robbing buyers of their leverage in the transaction, it's also often causing them to give up their protections. And if this was due to organic market behavior, it would be an entirely different story. But it's not. It's due to institutional investors manipulating residential real estate markets. Our buyers are entirely exposed and vulnerable in the transaction, and it's stressful. Cash offers, low risk, no appraisal, they can pay well above list price, no financing contingencies, you don't have to deal with underwriting, can close quickly. It's very difficult to compete against. These transactions are very asymmetrical. The seller has all the power. So our buyers have no leverage, they have no protections, and they don't have time. These institutional investors use algorithms, the godlike technology that can pick up the property within 15 minutes of hitting the market and submit a cash offer within 2 hours. It's unreasonable to expect buyers to be able to drop everything to see a home within 2 hours so that they can get in front of these things. So oftentimes we're not in front of them, they're already sitting there. There's a lot of unreasonable things taking place, and again, it's not due to organic market factors. It's not just the big money of these institutions that buyers are competing with, it's also their technology. These are conversations that need to take place. Is it reasonable to expect buyers to be able to go up against institutional money and godlike technology? Clearly, I'm not a comedian, but you look at meme culture, comedy seems to be a way to reach people. So take a look at this. This is talking about the technology that we are up against. We talked about Aladdin in the last video.
What if I told you there is a robot that controls more wealth than any country on earth, including private equity and real estate? Aladdin, which stands for Asset, Liability, and Debt Derivative Investment Network. Over the last 2 years, BlackRock and other funds using Aladdin's data have begun buying up single-family homes.
We are very exposed with technology that powerful. Not only are we exposed because what happens if it malfunctions, we're also exposed because we don't know how it behaves. These conversations need to take place at some point, so we are inviting that to happen. Good evening, Team Human. We have breaking news to share as we have just received word that the WCO, the World Consciousness Organization, has declared a global state of emergency. According to the WCO, humanity has surpassed apex predator status and they are now a danger to themselves. After reviewing the current state of the world, a team of conscious humans who are not funded by shitty people with an agenda has determined that humanity is now in possession of godlike technology under medieval institutions with Paleolithic emotions, comparable to those who lived in the Stone Age. The WCO warns that this combination is likely to achieve a multitude of outcomes, all of which are catastrophic and potentially existential. Humanity now has the capacity to control the weather, to blow everything up with nuclear weapons, and to create and destroy entire species, previously things only God could do. However, they are leaving the decision-making up to medieval institutions in a state of decay, run by the equivalent of drunk toddlers with matches. Furthermore, they have yet to figure out how to have difficult conversations, how to tell the truth, or how to take accountability. Social philosopher Daniel Schmachtenberger, one of the most sophisticated thinkers on the planet today, and also one of a handful of humans who seems capable of being radically honest about reality, had this to say.
Because we can't model ourselves as apex predators when we have the ability to extinct whole species, ruin whole biospheres, make new species, that's no longer an adequate model.
We've been kind of shitty stewards of power for a long time. We've used our power to extinct other species, destroy ecosystems, destroy other cultures, and oppress people of lower classes. We've done some good stuff with it. We've been a very mixed bag, but the mixed bag that we are has used power destructively enough that with the arms race of that continuing to exponential tech, if you continue to be equally shitty stewards of power with exponential tech, everything blows up. You ruin the planet and you have wars that nobody wins and can make it through. And so either we continue to be humans like the humans we have been and the thing self-terminates, or we are getting so much power through the technology we've created, we are forced to become good stewards of that power so we don't destroy ourselves. And good stewards of that power means, what does it mean to be a good steward of power itself? It's the wisdom, love, values, prudence that would guide that. Either we have to step up into that kind of planetarily to safely steward the power, or we destroy ourselves with it. We keep building better tech. We keep destroying nature and killing each other better with it. We don't get to do that forever. So this phase is coming to an end, and there's a wickedness of our ways and how we deal with power that has to be reconciled. And the nature of continued technological power, if it is driven by the lower angels of our nature, it self-terminates. And so if that power continues, it forces the higher angels of our nature to become the basis of culture, or we self-terminate. Like, that's the forcing function.
As technology is kind of giving us the power of gods, we have to get the love and wisdom and understanding of gods, or we self-terminate with that power. I don't think that we can say that anything smaller than that could possibly be adequate.
Thank you, Daniel. We're grateful that at least one person is having this conversation. Tune in later for more on this, along with this week's special, Are We Living in a Virtual Reality? It's not just about our disadvantaged buyers. We see the forest through the trees. You can totally choose to be an ostrich and stick your head in the sand, but this issue impacts you.
What side of history do I want to be on? Oh shit, like this one's going down in the history books. I actually need to make the choice that I can look my grandchildren in the eye on.
Whatever part of life I'm focused on is connected to the rest of life. And if I'm not holding the whole thing, I'm probably driving an arms race where the thing that I'm okay causing harm to will end up harming the thing that I care about.
While we know we are up against algorithms and apathy, it doesn't matter. We're not giving up. We're going to keep fighting for our buyers, but we also believe in you. Apathy comes from a lack of agency. You are either the agent of your life or you're the victim of your life. So agency is acting on your own behalf. Anyone with an agenda doesn't want you to exercise personal agency. They want your agency. Awareness is fundamental to agency. Without collective awareness, we don't have collective agency, which means we can't advocate for ourselves. That is the idea here. This is a collective problem. This is how we cultivate collective agency.
So how we get clear strategy, devotion, and will aligned, like, to me, that's a minimum requisite. That in the individual, and then the groups of people aligning who are all in that way for collective capacity.
That is the entire idea, to put this information out, not to scare anybody, but to empower the collective, the community, humanity, to advocate for ourselves, to advocate on our own behalf. We don't have an advocate. There is nobody advocating for us. And without organization, we're unable to do it for ourselves. Without awareness, information, and actionable things we can do, we have no agency. The supply and demand issue is very real. For anybody outside the industry that needs context, let us share.
As private equity firms gobble up what's left of the residential real estate market.
You look at big markets, supply is off by about 85 to 90%.
Because she was constantly outbid by Wall Street companies buying homes with cash.
Happened all the time.
House to open house, a caravan of people coming in.
On those homes that sold, they sold in a week or less. Think about that. Of all the shortages affecting our economy, I'm sad to report that I think the housing shortage is going to last the longest.
This is not typical market behavior. This is institutional money coming after generational wealth.
They want to monopolize the rental market, and the way that they're doing that is buying up these homes. The one and only way left for ordinary Americans to build wealth.
For most Americans, this is the single largest investment they will ever make in their life.
Right. Chilton says the top 4 Wall Street firms own between 7,000 and 8,000 homes in Middle Tennessee. He's concerned wealth is moving away from families.
It's another example of where equity is going from individuals to institutional investors.
And we can't afford to jeopardize a generation of wealth on this side of the gap.
In the United States today, hedge funds are buying up entire neighborhoods, outbidding individual buyers by up to 50% above the asking price. Families are increasingly bidding up against large institutional money. Is it fair for Wall Street to distort a market like this? John Burns Real Estate Consulting states that there are over 200 investment firms getting in on housing, major players like JP Morgan and BlackRock Incorporated. As The Atlantic reports, between 2011 and 2017, 200,000 homes worth a combined $36 billion were bought up by some of the largest private equity groups and hedge funds. This figure is now at 60 billion, almost doubling in 4 years. Today, it's gotten to the point where institutional investors hold at least 20% of single-family rentals in some urban parts of the United States. Single-family rental homes may now be a hot new moneymaker for Wall Street. In contrast to private mum and dad landlords, these new corporate landlords are forced to increase returns for their shareholders. This means aggressive cost cutting and creating new penalties for renters. There have been a slew of lawsuits against corporate landlords, unsafe living conditions, mold issues, cockroach infestations, repeated flat-out refusals to fix major issues.
What is the right basis for certainty and trust? What is the right process to go through to have adequate certainty to act, acknowledging the consequentiality of inaction as well? And what is the right basis for trust of an authority, of an in-group, of your own process? Recognizing that everything is being weaponized. Every physical tool can be turned into a weapon. I can build a house with a hammer, I can hit somebody in the head with it, right? Because the tool is just an extension of capacity. Every cognitive tool and every religious tool, like anything that affects and moves humans, can be turned into a weapon, and they all are right now.
Surveyed tenants of one major corporate landlord.
Nearly half had experienced plumbing problems. 1/5 said that their unit had mold. 18% reported a leaking roof. The corporate owner remained distant.
He didn't cut the electricity off before he even drilled a hole into that light, which is like it'd be alive.
Inability to even get a live person on the phone to get help.
And unlawful evictions were all part of these lawsuits. One corporate landlord, American Homes for Rent, began billing tenants for repairs after they had moved out. They increased their revenue from these actions by more than 1,000%.
It's one of hundreds of complaints about American Homes for Rent. The company aims to please investors. What about the tenants?
A company that's taken in millions of dollars from Wall Street investors. They've had mold. The latest is a $1,300 landscaping bill.
I've paid them $74,000 over the last 3 years.
These Wall Street firms are taking a new approach.
But now they're buying up land and building entire rental communities. They are all newly built single-family homes in this large neighborhood owned by American Homes for Rent.
Entire neighborhoods are being sold to companies. Recently, 124 homes in Texas were sold for a total of $32 million. The bid was 50% over the average asking price for such property.
And now we're in the sand trap around the corner with thunderstorm coming.
As this was going on, something started to happen. The investment companies that were buying up these homes began to consolidate power. First, investment firms began to create companies to manage their homes.
Blackstone Investments established Innovation Homes, who is backed by firms such as BlackRock and Morgan Stanley. American Homes for Rent, which is backed by investment firms such as Vanguard, acquired American Residential Properties in a $1.5 billion deal.
And by 2017, two major players controlled nearly 60% of the market. As Wall Street and these investment companies continue to acquire more real estate, they're competing with real people, and instead of building wealth, they'll continue to give money to corporations, and the money that they can muster is limitless in comparison to individual families. So the big question is,
what side of history do I want to be on?
We would not be in our integrity without bringing this information to you. So we could reframe this as opportunity.
What it can also do is decouple someone from short-term game theoretic self-interest.
There's a pretty attractive theory out about agency and about the anxiety epidemic and the emphasis on mindfulness practices, that all of that stems from a deteriorating, declining sense of self-agency.
Cognitive dissonance was never as bad before we had access to know what was going on in the rest of the world, because if there was a problem that we were aware of, it was probably affecting us. When you can know what's going on at a global level and you can't respond to awareness agency mismatch is pretty severe.
Apathy comes from a lack of agency, from the feeling that we can't do anything about this. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We can do something about this. We have the awareness, we have the information.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like the potential synthesis of the game theoretic dynamics as well as utilitarian and virtuous ethics is effectively soul force. You know, it's what Gandhi called satyagraha, and that idea of being lived by love. There is a surrender to the rightness of those three things that you just described.
The will center, the heart center, the mind center, clear strategy, devotion, and will.
Like, that's my lost card in the deck at this point, is us somehow collectively finding our way to that. I've got half an idea here. Is there something that's the reverse of leave no trace ethics. We commit to governing our actions based on the aggregate impact of thousands of us, of tens of thousands of us. And if one of us did that thing and then 10,000 of us also did that thing, then there would be irreparable harm. So is there a way for us to have an ethic of what ought I do based on the amplified model of what we all must do or can never do?
Kind of a dope idea. What if we all just stop doing it together?
The agency piece is really powerful. Agency and leadership for a hopeful future. It's the sum of us that are going to address the conversation. The concept that we're being intellectually farmed down algorithms through hashtags into these funnels of thought and feeling and outrage, how we collectively make sense of things together when we are being radicalized and we don't really understand it because of the overwhelm.
Well, this is the thing we were saying earlier about agency. When people have a low sense of agency, there's a desire to have some sense of agency, even if it's not real. Also, when people have a low sense of belonging, when people have a lot of uncertainty and overwhelm, fake certainty, fake belonging, fake agency are pretty problematic, and ultimately get to be in service of somebody else's agency and strategy that you probably aren't aware of in full. Population-centric warfare attacks on mindsets of people and being able to radicalize mindsets of people, turn them against each other, that kind of thing, which is radically easy with the internet and social media. Coupling your sense-making and your agency actually matters. If you think of it from an evolutionary perspective, evolution selects for the ability to respond to what is sensed.
And it's different than complex design that is unconscious. We have the possibility of moving from being parts of the whole that are competing with each other, but moving to having power that makes that no longer possible, to actually being agents for the whole. I think this next shift is us realizing that as technology is kind of giving us the power of gods, we have to get the love and wisdom and understanding of gods, or we self-terminate with that power.
We don't have to keep doing things the same way. One of my favorite quotes is, "You can't solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it." We're well aware that these questions disrupt the status quo, but maybe the status quo needs to be disrupted. I've talked about this quite a bit. If you've ever backpacked a slot canyon that's difficult to access, you know what it's like. People just act like humans. People act like good humans. I think that's a pretty dope idea.